Good morning, Bitcoin. The price of Bitcoin is up 3.23% in the last 24 hours, with a last of 53,700, a high of 53,976, and a low of 50,755. That's $1 for 1,858 Satoshis. Volume was at 7,684 Bitcoins changing hands. The market continues to lean long, with 96% of the market heading that direction. Bitcoin dominance was at 59%. Welcome to Blockstream Markets Weekly, February 19th, 2021. Written by Jesse Knudsen. Blockstream. BlackRock dabbles. Canadian ETF enjoys strong debut. MSTR to add another 900 million. CME futures post record 5 billion daily volume. 141 billion double line capital says Bitcoin is the stimulus asset. Bitcoin fund inflows see third best week ever. What's happening in the markets? Bitcoin makes gold suffer. Bitcoin rallying into the end of the week on pace to finish up 11% for the eighth win of the past 10 weeks. Traditional markets remain supportive of Bitcoin gains, with most major indices just off record highs. Treasury yields firming somewhat, and sentiment around a post-COVID recovery continuing to gain traction. A bounce in Treasury yields continued to weigh on gold, which fell to a 7-month low as Bitcoin investment product inflows gained to the third highest week on record. It looked like JPM's prediction last year that Bitcoin could make gold suffer for years is playing out to some extent. This week's investment product inflows were probably also significantly underreported, given a strong first day of trading by North America's first Bitcoin ETF this week, as flow aggregators have yet to incorporate that data into their analysis. The price is the news. News flow this week remained positive, with MicroStrategy announcing a new $900 million debt offering to buy Bitcoin, BlackRock beginning to dabble in Bitcoin, Coinbase's valuation hitting $77 billion on private markets ahead of the IPO, and the successful launch of Canada's first ETF, boosting the probability for a similar but larger product south of the border. All of that was overshadowed, though, as Bitcoin extended gains past $50,000 this week, resetting the previous all-time high and inching closer to a $1 trillion market cap. Bitcoin, the confluence of all trends. This week, the head of 141 billion AUM double-line capital and the longtime gold bull Jeffrey Gundlach noted that Bitcoin might well be the stimulus asset that many expected gold would be. While Bitcoin moved closer to a $1 trillion market cap this week, gold not only dipped below $1,800 for the first time in 2 months, but also saw its 50-day moving average cross below its 200-day moving average. Part of the reason Bitcoin is outperforming gold is that it not only has characteristics of an inflation-friendly asset, but also characteristics of risk assets. Great charts on this below. Bitcoin is at the confluence of many massive multi-year trends: a growing distrust in establishment institutions, the great $68 billion wealth transfer from boomers to their children, the growth of cross-border digital finance, the erosion of individual sovereignty by big government and big tech, and the acceleration of inflationary pressures. The tinder of these trends has been building for decades. The pandemic, or perhaps more accurately, the policy response to it, is really just the spark that set it all aflame. The importance of $1 trillion. Before this year, Bitcoin's market cap was closer to a mid to large cap stock than an asset class. At $1 trillion, this changes. Suddenly, Bitcoin becomes a real asset class that pulls in more money. This trend has clearly already begun, and we've already seen a torrent of mainstream institutional investors and corporate adoption news. Another shorter term data point was a record high $5 billion trading day on CME Bitcoin futures this week. I think this trend probably accelerates as we cross the $1 trillion mark. One of those drivers could be the proliferation of ETFs. Bloomberg wrote this week about the probability of the US ETF may be higher given support from industry heavyweights like Paul Tudor Jones and Stan Druckenmiller, adoption by payment platforms like PayPal, and Biden's nomination of Gary Gensler as SEC chairman, seen as Bitcoin friendly. Not to mention the launch of Canada's first Bitcoin ETF today, which looks like it traded multiples of the biggest ETF in Canada on its debut, and the approval of the second Bitcoin ETF this week. Dips for ants. While price action doesn't look to have overheated, it's definitely getting warm, and the stock to flow multiple is getting a bit stretched. After breaking above 1.6x this week, it's now just shy of a 3 year high. That said, dips this year have typically been shorter and shallower than expected. There continues to be a pretty good bid out of the US, with prices on Coinbase mostly trading at a premium this week. The Purpose Bitcoin ETF launch in Canada this week should add some support to the US bid as it gets its full first week of trading next week. We may see a period of consolidation incoming, but given peaks in on chain transactions and exchange volumes clustered around the $48,000 level, chart below, this is probably a fairly strong line of support. Bitcoin market news. MicroStrategy upsizes debt offering to buy more Bitcoin. Size increased to $900 million from the original $600 million. MicroStrategy currently holds 72,000 Bitcoin at an average cost of 16,109. Double Line Capital's Gundlach. Bitcoin is the stimulus asset. Jeffrey Gundlach leads $141 billion Doubleline Capital. I am a long term dollar bear and gold bull, but have been neutral on both for over 6 months. Lots of liquid poured into a funnel creates a torrent. Bitcoin, maybe the stimulus asset. Doesn't look like gold is. Bitcoin ETF roars in debut with $165 million of trading volume. This will trigger a string of copycat products. In a year, Bitcoin ETFs will be everywhere. Probably not good for the GBTC or hedge funds locked into that ARB trade. BlackRock has started to dabble in Bitcoin. In January, BlackRock added Bitcoin futures to two of its funds. People are looking for places that could appreciate under the assumption that inflation moves higher and that debts are building. So we've started to dabble a bit into it. Coinbase gets $77 billion evaluation from NASDAQ Private Market. IPO is expected within the next few months, but Coinbase valuation is already said to be $77 billion based on the trading of the company's privately held shares. Forbes reported 2 weeks ago that 4Q20 annualized revenues hit $2.3 billion with a profit margin of 20%, on par with brokerages like Schwab. The article said that its valuation could be as high as $100 billion based upon fintech revenue multiples. Gardner. Most corporates don't want to see Bitcoin on the balance sheet. Yes, but 5% said they would begin to hold Bitcoin in 2021, which I think is interesting because a year ago that number was almost certainly 0%. The top concern among those surveyed was Bitcoin's volatility. Canada approves second Bitcoin ETF application. Less than 3 weeks after filing a preliminary prospectus for a Bitcoin ETF, Evolve Funds Group Incorporated announced Tuesday that the Ontario Securities Commission had approved its fund. It follows approval for the Purpose Bitcoin ETF last week. The ETF will trade under the ticker EBIT for CAD trading and EBIT.U for USD. NYDIG files for American Bitcoin ETF approval. The fund's authorized participant, an organization with the right to create and redeem shares of an ETF, will be Morgan Stanley. NYDIG is the Bitcoin subsidiary of Stone Ridge, a $10 billion alternative asset manager. Safety and Amos highlighted all transactions, creation, redemption, and fees will be in BTC, not USD. All in fee set to just 0.5%. And finally, Bitcoin made the front page of the Wall Street Journal this week with the article Bitcoin trades above $50,000 for the first time. Charts. Risk on 1. Fund managers gone wild. Fund managers surveyed by Bank of America Merrill Lynch are running record level of risk. The all-time high in investors taking higher than normal risk is now at 25% in February. Seems higher than any time on record since 2001. Risk on 2. Extreme risk on. Investor flows heavily skewed towards risk, equities. Universal FOMO across asset classes has to end in tears at some point. And you can see the investors have an extreme amount of risk, greater than equity or government bonds. Seems about the highest risk on the chart since 2008, 2013, 2017, all of which looks like previous risk peaks caused by a sudden drop in risk on. Inflows into inflation-friendly assets moons. Bitcoin is really the perfect asset for the current macroeconomic backdrop, an inflation hedge with a high beta kicker. And you can see the surge of ETF flows, energy, industrials, materials, real estate, commodities, inflation, and more. And it's all surging. $48,000 is the new $35,000. Both on-chain transaction and exchange volumes indicate significant support at $48,000. Below that, $35,000 shows another peak in volume and transaction data from the 4 weeks of consolidation Bitcoin did around that level. Retail traders, they're back. The chart below plots Bitcoin in orange versus GameStop in red. It's interesting to note how the Wall Street bets phenomenon sucked retail attention away from Bitcoin. The GME dump now has retail eyes back on Bitcoin. Third best week of fund inflows or better. Digital asset funds saw inflows of $602 million this week, the third best on record. Bitcoin funds amounted for 62% at $602 million. However, that number doesn't capture the first big day of trading from North America's first Bitcoin ETF. So actual fund inflows were significantly larger and will certainly grow next week, given a full week of trading. Thank you for listening to Blockstream Markets Weekly, as read by Thomas Hunt, the most concise roundup of Bitcoin market action in the industry. Give us a thumbs up down below and subscribe to the World Crypto Network for more updates like this. The price of Bitcoin is up 3.77% in the last 24 hours, with a last of 53,966, a high of 53,976, and a low of 50,755. That's $1 for 1,855 Satoshis. Volume was at 7,774 Bitcoins changing hands. The market continues to lean long, with 96% of the market heading that direction. Bitcoin dominance was at 59%. Be sure to subscribe to the World Crypto Network down below and catch our daily news program Today in Bitcoin. Also, check out our Friday wrap up show coming up later today, The Bitcoin Group. Be sure to subscribe and click the bell for notifications. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, bye bye.